Washington was able to escape from Stanford. We got some more thoughts for you.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies and Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at side.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Lars Hanson, we were just talking about it early on. Got some more thoughts from the Stanford game where Washington was able to escape with a 42-33 win. Just what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of, I mean, nothing has truly changed, right? I mean, the AP poll came out today. Washington's still standing at 5, Oregon move up to 6. And that's kind of what we said and what I hinted at last night, right? Or Washington, they're not going to lose any ground by still winning, right? Because the only way you lose ground is when you finally take an L. The problem is I almost feel like when that L does come, they will fall further than Oregon and potentially USC when they've had their first loss, just because of how these kind of middle games have gone, right? Especially with Arizona State, now Stanford, where it's like, okay, you were winning and finally caught up to you. So now we're going to penalize you a little bit more because of how those other games went. We couldn't penalize you in the time because other teams lost and like Oklahoma lost, but Washington didn't move up. Right. And they're not a top 4 team right now.
So I agree that they're not a top 4 team right now, but I disagree that they're going to fall further than you think. And the reason I say that is because the schedule is so tough, right? Where they have a big time win over Oregon. Even the Arizona win on the road looks better and better as the week goes along, or as the weeks just keep going, as we saw them beat Oregon State last night that wasn't Arizona, but still they were able to beat Oregon State, who was ranked number 11 at the time. So that's going to be another thing that's working in their favor. And then let's talk about the November stretch, right? It's USC at USC, then it's at home against Utah, at Oregon State, and then at home against Washington State. That's still a really, really tough stretch, despite, the Cougs losing to Arizona State last night too, which I just have to throw in there. But that's a really, really tough stretch where I can't remember looking at the full poll, but I believe USC did stay ranked just kind of at the very bottom of the AP poll. I don't think they'll end up being in the college football playoff ranking, but that's something where that's still not going to be, penalized as a ranked. Like, let's say they lose that game, right? And that's the one game they lose in November. That's not going to be penalized a whole ton as it's a ranked loss or a loss to a ranked team on the road. That's tough. If, let's say, it's that Cal game and they lose that game, different story. But I think that with the way that the schedule has shaped up for Washington, that it won't penalize them nearly as much.
And that's fair. I mean, certainly, I think if they lose to USC, that's not a bad loss, right? But if you lose, right, let's say to Utah the problem is also if you have a second loss, you're done, right? That's just kind of the way that it's going to. I mean, but that's also the thing is now Oregon State has 2 losses. Utah, I believe, has 2? Yeah, 6-2, 2 losses. USC has 2 losses. So the problem is if you lose to a 2-loss USC team, I don't know. Part of me thinks that that'll hurt a little bit more than a 1-loss Oregon State because the Oregon State's the only 1-loss team left, right? I mean,
nope, they have 2 losses now.
But now they have 2 losses, right? So now. Yep. Oregon's the only 1-loss team that you would still potentially play moving forward, which would be in the Pac-12 championship game. So it's like, it's not just a matter of winning, but it's like you can squeak past USC or you can lose narrowly to USC, and that's fine. But then you have to beat Utah and Oregon State in somewhat of a convincing fashion to make the top, to put yourself in a position to beat Oregon again and win the Pac-12. Because if you win the Pac-12 championship, you're in. I have a hard time believing even a 1-loss Pac-12 champion would be left out for the sake of a second Big Ten team or something like that. I just think that one would be a little harder sell. But I mean, again, it's going to be a gauntlet, right? And I think that's Washington is in the driver's seat and they control their own fate at this point. But the problem is it almost seems like the team that has 2 losses in them, but also no losses in them, right? It's almost like you can somehow see them going 4-0, but you can also see them going 2-2, not 3-1.
I hear what you're saying, and I want to start this with saying that I hear it, but I do have faith in this coaching staff, right? Where we've seen just kind of what Kalen DeBoer is able to do as like the months have gone on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the flu as we move on with the show here, because we got some other things we wanted to make sure we worked in this opener. And one of those things is that Kalen DeBoer deserves your trust, right? The guy is 19-2 as Washington's head coach.
Yeah.
He definitely deserves the benefit of the doubt. And especially if the flu was as bad as Dave Softy Mahler tweeted out yesterday, where, something like half the team maybe has it, where numbers weren't given, but that's just kind of the implication that was given with how bad the flu might have been. That's something that could have definitely played a part in the poor play. And we can see how that goes as the weeks go along. And that's going to be something to monitor. But one thing really quick, and this is off topic, but I said I was going to do it last night and I didn't. I just needed 30 seconds to rant about how bad that FS1 broadcast was last night, because it was atrocious. And Lars, I was saying to you just before we got on, and I had to kind of contain myself because I wanted to make sure I did this on the show. That was just the most embarrassing and abysmal broadcast I've ever heard. Because, yeah, it's Stanford. Yeah, there's no energy there. But Tim Brando and his crew brought nothing to that broadcast. They didn't even read the pronunciation guide. And to me, like, that's enough of its strike as it is just not preparing to do your job. Like, imagine if we just didn't prepare to come on the show every day and talk about the Huskies. Like, that's ridiculous. That's unacceptable, and people wouldn't listen to the show. We appreciate all the everydayers out there who do listen to the show, by the way. But not only do they just not get like names correct, yeah, there's some tough names to pronounce on this team, but like they weren't even like attempted. This is a top 5 team in the country right now, and that's just straight up embarrassing. It really is. Like what I said to you before we press record. Oregon would never get treated that way. Oregon would like that. They would never get a broadcast crew like that. Like, oh, I don't know how to say this player's name. USC, if they were ranked where Washington was, they would never. Or even now, they still wouldn't get that kind of be tossed aside that way by a television crew. That's ridiculous. And I think that's something that needed to be noted.
I mean, not only that, but I mean, for all that the Pac-12 network gets ripped on, and you can say things about the Pac-12 network, but even they would not have a crew like that. I mean, that's the thing, is their on-air talent is actually really good. It's just the distribution that the network struggles with, right? Which is right. The on-air talent has nothing to do with that, right? But I mean, Yogi Roth, he would never butcher anyone's. I mean, Ashley Adams, all those guys and girls, they are true professionals, and it just really seemed like, hey, you know what? Let's pull up to Stanford. Let's call this game, and we'll go home. Like, that was the amount of energy put into it. And I mean, it wasn't even honestly just about the pronunciations. They were getting numbers wrong. I mean, Tim Brando mentioned Camden Sermon as a potential safety option.
That's ridiculous.
Now now because we cover Washington, he's looking at the number 18, which is Vincent Holmes, right? So that I could see. I'm like, okay, maybe you play a freshman, et cetera, or whatever. But Vincent Holmes hasn't even played this season. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if he has, it's been in the fourth quarter, late in games, and certainly nothing that would be like, hey, this is the guy to watch. I mean, in 2 years, sure. A year from now, maybe.
Absolutely.
But not this year. And the fact that when I heard Camden Sermon's name mentioned in the first quarter, even I think it was before kickoff or right around kickoff, I'm just thinking to myself, like, we're in for a long one here. We're really in for a long game. And I mean, I had the television on all the way down. The volume was down to 0. I just watched. I had closed captioning on.
The last one here before we move on is like on the onside kick that Roma Dunze recovered. They said, "Oh, recovered by Jabbar Muhammad," or is that Roma Dunze? Like, I love both those guys. We love talking about those guys. They look so completely different. It's not hard. Like, it's not hard to like, oh, they're both number 1, but one of them is a lot taller than the other one. You can very easily differentiate between the two, but that's enough on that rant, because I know we got to move on here, and we are going to talk more about Washington's flu game. But first, it's time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. And much like Jalen Polk, who had a 92-yard touchdown catch in the second quarter and just had a fantastic day, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning and beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They're constantly releasing limited edition experimental styles to add to their variety. One of the best parts about them is there are no hangovers ever. You can find Athletic Brewing in-store, online, and at bars around the country. And you can also find Athletic Brew's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON. Check out 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. And before we move on here, we're also going to give a nice shout out to our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Big breath. Whew. All right. So our buddy Dave Softy Mahler tweeted out after the game that he heard that there were a lot of Huskies, not just Michael Penix, that who Kalen DeBoer talked about in his post-game press conference, that were dealing with the flu. And do you think that this has been going around for a couple weeks now? Because our buddy Ben Glassmeyer also took some time to tweet about it over the week, saying, "Yeah, I dealt with it last week, and it's a really nasty strain, whatever's going around this year." And it just really knocked him down for a couple of days. Do you think that that's just kind of something that's been going around like in the team?
Yeah. So what I had heard was that right after the Oregon game, kind of that weekend is when it started to go around the campus and kind of start to trickle around the team. And I think because of whatever strain it is or whatever, the design, whatever the virus is, and whatever the flu or, whatever the kind it is, it just seems like it's lasting longer and harder for certain guys to shake. And it's becoming a little bit more than a typical, 48-hour flu, right? It's not just like, hey, I'm here, I had to push through the game and whatever. It seems like it's lingering a little bit. And it's not that the players aren't taking care of themselves or things like that. It just seems like that just happens. Right, exactly. Because I know several people that don't play for the team that are around the campus that have also been sick for about a week. So it kind of, to me, everything adds up to where over the last couple of weeks, it's kind of just gone around, and maybe some guys didn't get it after the Oregon game, but they got it after Arizona State or things like that. And so I think it's also kind of maybe like an overlap of like who got it when and who's come. Like Penix is probably almost out of his system by now, but maybe there's some other guys on the team who picked it up last week and tried to play through it and things like that. So you would imagine probably by the time the USC game is done, middle of next week, everybody should be out of it. Like in terms of that flu and everything should be gone from the team. Because at that point, otherwise, it's like, what are we doing? Like, I think at that point, I would be surprised if. But the thing is, they're still playing through it. Like, it wasn't like Jalen McMillan left the game because he was sick. He was hurt. He also maybe happened to be sick, or maybe just not low energy, but just the flu kind of draining your body of everything, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of how it more or less impacts it. And it makes, the muscles are harder, things like that. And also kind of fogs your head a bit. So it's like, okay, I can see why it's caused them to have a little bit of a hiccup. But I think at this point, it's just, I would be surprised if it lingers past this week.
I'm with you there. And I know it's something we shouldn't probably touch on for too much, but it's definitely something to be noted, because now for 2 straight weeks, there's been this lack of energy, where sometimes it does come from something like the flu, right? And that's something where the coaching staff has never really just kind of come out and say, yep, we've got 27 guys, whatever that might be, that have the flu and that are just like looking a little bit under the weather right now. They're never going to say something like that. So not that we want to speculate, but it's just kind of like, yeah, these things kind of seem to add up, right, at a certain point. And moving forward, you're right. I think that we're almost through this, where however many people have it, probably going to feel better, hopefully here within the next 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it might be. And you can just kind of go from there. But it's something where, especially when you look at just the way the defense looked throughout some of the Stanford game, there were just some places where it's like, oh, that doesn't seem very typical of this defense, where they're kind of just like a lot of like just lunge tackles, where the tackling it looks like it's still somewhat improving. It's not necessarily great, but it does seem like there's, like, especially the Arizona State game, there were some plays where it's like, yeah, this looks much better. And then other plays where it's not really. So I don't know. It feels like something that we should definitely just throw out there and talk about.
No, I mean, it's certainly, it's not an excuse, right? But it's a factor,
For sure.
right? Much like Penix being quote unquote hurt or quote unquote injured or quote unquote under the weather, he's still playing through it. And Michael will be the first to say, hey, look, whether I'm sick or got one arm or not, if I'm out and I'm able to play, I'm going to play as hard as I can. I'm not going to say, yeah, well, I'm a little under the weather, so I kind of, my head was a little foggy, and that's why I made some bad. No, he's never going to say that.
No.
And honestly, nor would
nobody ever would. Yeah,
right. Because I mean, when you're a high end athlete, and when you're even in college, right? I mean, we're talking about 18 to 22 years, but they're still like basically semi pros. They're almost professionals at this point. So it's like, okay, yes, you can call in sick if you want, but also like just kind of knowing the value that certain guys have to the team, they're just going to want to play through it unless they truly can, right? Like if Penix has like a damaged shoulder or something, he's not going to try and push through that to injure himself more, right? But if he's got to throw up on the sideline, but then he's like, oh, cool, I got it out of my system, I'm good for like 20 minutes. He's going to get out there and go, right? Because otherwise, I mean, DeBoer said after the Oregon game where Michael Penix was having, I mean, me and you both I pointed out, I put on Twitter, we're like, oh, it looked like Dylan Morris was about to walk in the huddle before the offense came out in the fourth quarter. And then Penix literally just bolted off the sideline. It's because he was getting IVs taken out. So it's like, they're doing literally everything possible to get these guys to be able to play. So it's like the fact that they have played and continued to win, I think is honestly a testament to this team's strength. So that kind of does lead me, right. That does lead me to think, okay, these guys have faced so much adversity. Once they're fully healthy, like just turn them loose, right? It's a matter of they're going to get turned loose on their own because the energy is coming back to their bodies. I think it's not necessarily anything the coaches can do. And if you don't play them for a couple of days of practice, it's like, okay, but I mean, I think everything still matters on Saturday.
No, I like that point a lot. And because just so we can kind of move on from that a little bit, I think that as we move into November here, we're going to see a different team. Because we saw just last year, after the two losses, Kalen DeBoer and the coaching staff just really just kind of seemed to flip a switch. And Kalen DeBoer's record in November is spectacular. I had it written down here, but I totally forgot where I put it. His record in November is absolutely fantastic. Our buddy Tony Castricone put out a great stat. His career record in the month of November. And it's something where he just seems to know how to get his team over the finish line and get them to where they need to be. And I feel like this year, the goal is it's no different, right? The stage is just much bigger for him. And I think that we're going to see just some cohesion on offense return. We're going to see the play calling just kind of calm down a little bit and solidify itself. And we can kind of, I'm sure that's something else we'll talk about a little bit later in the week, but there were just some things like the play clock management, which I know we talked about yesterday, where it's just kind of like this doesn't seem like the offense we've seen all year long, where it's, oh, well, no, this needs to be perfect, where it's just kind of going to be, all right, let's go. Let's just snap the ball and let's get through this. And I think that's something we'll see a little bit more as we get into the month of November.
Yeah, and I mean, well, I think that, part of the argument has been maybe UW hasn't shown everything in their playbook. It's like, okay, fair. You can hold some stuff, but once that page turns to November, you got to open that whole thing wide open. I mean, you already beat Oregon once. And yes, I understand the whole, hey, maybe we don't want to show Oregon everything. So if we play them again, it's like, but here's the thing. What if you lose 2 games between the beginning and end of November? You're not playing Oregon again. So
who cares?
Right. And so I don't think the staff is truly taking that approach. I have a hard time believing Ryan Grubb is withholding something that could actually make the offense better. Now, maybe he's having a few plays he's not run as much or kind of kept up his sleeve. But I think, to your point, whatever is restricting the playbook or whatever has restricted the playbook is going to open wide up in the month of November. Maybe it won't be every game, but I think certainly against USC and I think certainly against Oregon State, it's going to open up a lot because it almost has to, especially against Oregon State and USC.
I think one of the biggest things to note with that is let's see what the health of Jalen McMillan is like going forward, because that's going to be a really, really big part of it. Because it's something you and I have talked about at length, where he just kind of opens up so much what this playbook can do, where his speed and his ability just kind of over the middle of the field, his run after catch, everything it is that he does just opens up so much more. And it's not like they can't call certain plays without him on the field, But it just, when he is out there, and that's no shot at German Bernard or Giles Jackson or Denzel Boston or whoever else it might be running that route, filling that role. It's just Jalen McMillan's speed, ability, and just what he's shown from what he's put on tape already just kind of strikes extra fear into the defense, I would say. And before I move on here, because we're going to talk a little bit about the defensive depth, because there's a whole lot that we can talk about over there. We got to give a shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks as we record this on a Sunday afternoon. And I as I always have to remind everybody how much I love talking about fantasy sports, because Prize Picks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. Testing my skills on Prize Picks this football season is one of the most exciting ways, if not the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And some of the things that make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app are quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. And I mean, hey, Prize Picks now also offers Apple Play for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. You want to get on the action? Go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, we hinted at it a little bit earlier. Do you have any questions about the defensive depth, or is it just kind of, do you think that things are going to solidify themselves, whether it's through this flu or through some minor things? Because I think I have some questions about the secondary, but I want to let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, I mean, really, it's not a matter of depth at any point aside from the secondary, right? Because everything else, I mean, we know what the defensive line is. We know what the linebackers are. We know for the most part what the cornerbacks are like. I mean, we saw Javion Green get a few more snaps against Stanford than he has this season. But for the most part, it just comes down to the safeties. I mean, I know we'll talk about it ad nauseam in this segment, but just like getting it's not a leadership thing, because you still have Eddie and you still have Alfonso, but Asa has been always kind of, in the coaching staff has said it, where it's like he's the guy that really can just read that defense and just kind of put everyone in the right position and things like that. But he hasn't been able to stay healthy this season. Cam Fabiculana has also missed a couple of games, including this past weekend against Stanford. So it's a matter of, okay, when you face a team like Stanford, when you face a running quarterback who's also able to pass it like DJ Uyunglele, and I mean,
I will say Ashton Daniels made some fantastic throws yesterday.
I was going to say, and so like the part of it is like, can the coverage get better? Probably, maybe a little bit. I mean, I will say to my point about tackling, they have the highest tackle grade of the season.
Did they really?
Stanford, according to PFF. So at a solid 80.
PFF never lies when it fits your narrative.
Right. Well, here's the thing. The problem has been the only other game above 78 was week 2, which is against Boise State, or was that Tulsa? That's Tulsa, yeah. So the only two that they've had plus 75 grades on in tackling was Stanford and Tulsa. And everything else has been atrocious. So again, if they can, because that, I will say, that was one thing that I really was impressed with. And again, I'm not saying it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because they did miss a couple of sacks and things like that. But Eddie, Jabbar, even Elijah Jackson, everybody, Raylan Goforth made several tackles that were key. Right when the completion happened, there wasn't a ton of yards after catch or a ton of yards after contact. That, I think, is the key, right? Because no matter what, especially when you play USC and you play Oregon State, they're going to get their yards. This is not 2016 Washington with the defense of, yesteryear and Buda Baker and all those guys. But it's still capable enough to where you can hold those teams to, well, USC, I don't know. It could either be a shootout or it's going to be like 17-10. It's going one way or the other here. Like,
wait, hold on. No. I can't let this one slide. You think that Washington's defense, or that Washington is only going to put up 17 points on an Alex Grinch defense? I can't let that slide.
But I'm not saying they will put up 17 points. I'm just saying, I'm more or less saying the type of game, right? Like a 27-24, right? Something where we both expect them to be 40 plus, right? USC and Washington's offense should get. But here's the thing: as Lincoln Riley noted in his press conference on Saturday night, nobody would have thought Washington would win a game without scoring an offensive touchdown, and Arizona State proved him wrong. So it's a matter of, yes, is Washington's offense one of the best in the country when they're clicking on all gears? Absolutely. But fact of the matter is, they're not clicking on all gears right now. They're close. They're not terrible. But I think certainly from where the offense is right now to where its potential and where its ceiling is, there's still a decent amount of gap there. So I think that the USC game could be one to say, hey, look, plant your flag, hold USC's offense to maybe 25 or 30 points and put 50 or 60 on Grinch's defense and just call it a day.
The second part was the only reason I wanted to put that out, because I don't disagree that it could be a very tight game. It's more I'm just going to continue to take shots until that. Yeah, that was the whole reason I wanted to go there. But because I also wanted to talk about the safety depth in this team, right? We don't know what happened to Asa Turner. Maybe he was also sick, but we have no idea what his injury was that kept him out. And since he's come back, he's played really well with the club on his hand, and he's been somewhat restricted, but he's played well enough to help this team. And he is a really important piece of this defense. So getting him back is going to be crucial. Vince Nunley there are other factors there that we're not entirely sure about, but whatever it is, those need to be figured out really quickly, because while Asa was hurt, especially against Arizona, and he played really well against Cal and Michigan State, he played a lot too. Vince Nunley played really, really, really well. So whatever off the field issues that he had need to be sorted out somewhat quickly for not only his own sake, and we wish him nothing but the best, but just for the sake of this defense moving forward, because he really did do a lot to help that secondary when he was in there.
I don't want to speculate, but I'm going to half speculate here. Part of me, because it just dawned on me as you brought up Vince Nunley.
Sure.
DeBoer said it's not injury related, but he did not specifically state that he was suspended, right? Because he did it with Lisa Gordon, did it with Tybo Rogers, where he said, hey, look, and Tybo Rogers ended up playing and suiting up 3 or 4 weeks later. So it's not like
he played the Stanford game.
No, right, and he just played a ton of season. But the point, it was like they both were indefinitely suspended, which usually to us would be like, okay, they're going to be out for a while. Like maybe they just redshirt him this year and try again next year. Vince Nunley has played in 4 games, sir. You can play in 5, but there's already a redshirt thing there, right? But I'm saying, but that part of me wonders, okay, with him playing 4 games, is there some extra, like maybe he'll get an extra year with coaching changes or things like that? I don't know. But my point, it's just intriguing that it was 2, 3, and 4, 2 through 5, right? We didn't play against Boise State, but he played the next 3 weeks or the next 4 games.
Right.
And then hasn't played since. So it's like, that is a really weird stretch to play those first 4 and then nothing since.
But also remember, the Tulsa game is when Asa got hurt. That's when that happened. So there's a correlation of when he did play. And then of course Asa came back in the Oregon game. But I think it goes a step beyond that, because Vince Nunley has added so much to this defense. And it's not like he said like, oh, I'm redshirting because I want to transfer, but he already has. That's something we know that's already happened. And then on top of that, why? Like, that's the way he's playing, like he'd be in line for starting role next season. And just the last point there is, we haven't even seen him on the sideline. We didn't see him. I don't remember seeing him suited up for the Oregon game. Definitely didn't see him suited up last week for Arizona State. And then I don't think he traveled. Like we weren't down there, but I don't think he traveled either.
And not only that, but also we've never talked to him.
That's true.
And he was requested a couple of times in fall camp, and the response was he wanted to play before he talked, which I respect, and I have no problem.
Oh, I've got no issue with that.
But we also kind of knew he was going to play, so that's why we wanted to talk to him. But then the fact that it's like, okay, now you did play, and we still didn't talk to you. I don't know. There's just, to me, it seems like there's an external factor at play that, again, it's probably a personal thing, and that's why we're not going to. But it's like, as we're speculating on, okay, what could it be that's keeping him out? Right, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, because I understand the whole point about Asa not playing and then coming back, but it was also, he was playing so well. It wasn't just like that he was playing. He was actually, like, he could have probably stayed as a starter over Asa. And, then you got Cam Fab and Dom and things like that. But it's almost like, but it's not a numbers thing, right? They would still play him. No. I mean, Mikel's taking those reps. So I don't know. I'm sure it'll probably get sorted out by the end of the season, but if we don't see him if we don't see him this weekend against USC in any way, shape, or form, and we don't see him against Utah, right?
Utah would be next, yeah.
Right. If we don't see him in either of those two games, I think the writing is on the wall.
It's just a very curious situation, which is why I know we both want to make sure we brought it up, because again, we don't want to speculate. We wanted to make sure the conversation was had because of how well he was playing. And because of how much, especially in a game like the Stanford game, where we saw Stanford take a lot of shots over the top and they were able to complete a couple of deep balls. Like that's the kind of the perfect kind of situation for him, because Kalen DeBoer just said, yeah, it's not injury related. And that's literally all he said. That was it. So I know we should just kind of leave it there, but it's just curious because of how well he was playing and how much he helped the team before this situation happened.
Yeah, and it's like, even if they're like changing in positions, like maybe they're making him a cornerback or maybe they're making him a Husky, it's like, okay, but then he should still be playing. So it's a matter, and I mean, maybe DeBoer is just protecting him by saying he's not suspended, but away from the team. But almost that screams.
He didn't even say that.
Right. He just like he's not. I'm not sure if he'll be available. Is the best way I'll characterize it. It's basically almost verbatim what DeBoer said, and it's like, okay, is he suspended? Because I mean, if he's suspended, for whatever, again, we're never gonna know the reason, and even if we do, probably won't be reported. But the point is, there's that missing link, that understanding of, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, okay, now I see why. Okay, cool. I'm not reporting it, but again, now I at least the dots can connect more. Now it's like you got 3 dots, and they're one's here, and there's nothing connecting them. It's like, all right, what are we missing? Where's the 4th dot? Where's the string? What's not getting connected? Because he would have been perfect over the top against Stanford. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like that's a great place to wrap this up. As always, great final thought from Lars. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers out there for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And if you're new to the channel, hey, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you want to subscribe, if you like, feel free to just throw a like on this video. Subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Super easy. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We are everywhere. Again, if you like the show, leave us a 5-star review. Hit like, hit subscribe. If you got any questions for us, leave them down in the comments. We'll try to get to them as many of those as we possibly can. And thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.